Picture the scene. You're at home, perhaps watching a movie or just relaxing on the sofa. Suddenly, a strange sound begins to approach, and as you look out of the window, you see something that makes your heart race. It's no ordinary group of people. It's an immense enemy army, advancing with overwhelming force, and the feeling of despair overwhelms you. It's as if the world is falling apart around you and there's no way out. Sounds like a scenario worthy of a blockbuster, right? But what if I told you it was much more than a movie? It's a true story, taken straight from the Bible, with a dose of suspense, unwavering courage, and a supernatural touch that will leave your hair standing on end. We're talking about a crucial and epic moment in the history of Jerusalem, where faith and divine power meet in an impressive battle. Get ready, because what comes next is nothing short of breathtaking. Let's start our story with a really fascinating character, Hezekiah, the king of Judah. To understand the magnitude of his story, we need to go back in time a little and see the setting in which he was inserted. Imagine a kingdom that was going through difficult times. The previous king, your father, was known for his evil deeds and the disastrous way in which he ruled. The worship of God was completely neglected, and pagan idols dominated the kingdom's religious scene. Altars to foreign gods were spread everywhere, and the worship of the true God was almost forgotten. It was a spiritual and moral chaos, where justice and truth seemed to be lost. And then comes Hezekiah, a young man of only 25, who takes over the throne of Judah with a challenging mission and a revolutionary spirit. Unlike his father, Hezekiah had a clear purpose: to restore true worship and give the kingdom back the spiritual purity he felt God wanted. He not only tried to do the right thing, but set out with a determination and courage that stood out enormously in his time. He began his reform with a sharp blow against idolatry. Just imagine, he tore down idols that had long been worshipped by the people. These idols were not just objects of worship, but symbols of an age of darkness and corruption. Hezekiah took radical measures. He destroyed the altars dedicated to foreign gods and even broke the famous bronze that had been erected by Moses, known as the bronze serpent. It was a symbol of faith that, ironically, had become an object of pagan worship. He recognized that what was originally an instrument of God was being used in the wrong way, and he acted to put it right. But Hezekiah's courage didn't stop there. Instead of just removing the idols, he restored and reopened the real temples, creating a space where the people could reconnect with God. He did this at a time when religious leaders were weakened and genuine worship was practically in ruins. For a young king, it was a monumental task, full of risks and challenges. Furthermore, Hezekiah was a king who was not afraid to oppose the dominant power of the time. He challenged the kingdom of Assyria, which was a huge and feared power. He did not submit to the demands of the Assyrian Empire, even when it seemed that defeat was inevitable. His unwavering faith and determination to follow God's laws, despite adversity, make him a shining example of leadership and faith. Hezekiah's courage and integrity are remarkable not only because he challenged the status quo, but because he did so with a spirit of humility and a deep trust in God. He believed that God was with him and that, despite all the difficulties, divine power was greater than any earthly force. So when we think of Hezekiah, we're not just talking about a king who made religious reforms. We're talking about a true reformer, a leader with a grand purpose, who faced an environment full of challenges and managed to transform the spirituality of an entire kingdom. His story is not only inspiring, it is a powerful testimony of faith and courage, which still resonates strongly today. Now we come to the most critical and tense part of the story. The kingdom of Judah was facing a colossal threat, and the situation was desperate. Picture the scene. Jerusalem, the holy city, was surrounded by a huge enemy army, led by the feared Assyrian king Sennacherib. This king was not just any ruler, he was a ruthless conqueror, known for his brutality and his ability to subjugate entire nations. Sennacherib had already devastated the northern kingdom, Israel, and now he set his sights on Jerusalem. The Assyrian forces were so numerous that it seemed impossible for any army to resist such power. The approach of this massive army was not an empty threat, it was a palpable reality, a storm of destruction about to descend on the city. Hezekiah, knowing that his kingdom had no way of facing such a military force head-on, found himself in an extremely difficult situation. The strength of his own army and the city's defenses were nothing compared to the might of the Assyrians. So, as a desperate measure to avert the impending catastrophe, Hezekiah took a courageous and pragmatic decision. He decided to try to negotiate with the Assyrian king. He sent emissaries to Sennacherib, offering a substantial tribute of gold and silver, in the hope that this would buy peace and prevent the invasion. To do this, Hezekiah had to deplete the coffers of the temple and the royal palace, literally emptying all available resources. The king of Judah was willing to pay any price to protect his city and his people from certain destruction. But here is where the situation becomes even more critical and complicated. The Assyrian king, who had already established a reputation for insatiable ambition, was not satisfied with the tribute offered. His thirst for conquest was so great that he saw the tribute only as a start and not as a solution. Hezekiah's offer, instead of being a means of preventing the invasion, only seemed to encourage Sennacherib to intensify his pressure. Hezekiah's emissaries faced a difficult deal, and Sennacherib's response was anything but favorable. The situation was about to escalate into a direct confrontation, and the hope of negotiating a peaceful settlement seemed increasingly remote. Sennacherib's words and actions were laden with disdain, and fear gripped the streets of Jerusalem. The city was now on the brink of collapse, with its inhabitants preparing for the worst. The threat of imminent destruction hung over every one of them, and what had seemed like the last hope of averting calamity was rapidly crumbling. It was a time of extreme tension and uncertainty, where every decision could mean the difference between survival and total destruction. Hezekiah was facing a monumental challenge, and the fate of Jerusalem hung in the balance. The situation in Jerusalem was becoming increasingly critical. The Assyrian king Sennacherib sent a messenger, not only to threaten, but to mock the faith of Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem. This messenger, with incomparable arrogance, challenged the people's belief, saying that no god could save a city from destruction when the Assyrians decided to conquer it. He was determined to demoralize and weaken the people's trust.
And he didn't stop there.
To make matters worse, the messenger made a seductive offer. If Jerusalem surrendered, the people would be taken to a land similar to their own, full of goods and prosperity. He offered a promising future, full of vineyards and honey, as a lure to surrender. It was a brutal psychological game, designed to create despair and try to get the inhabitants of Jerusalem to surrender, exchanging the promise of a better life for submission. Tension was at an all-time high, and the choice between surrendering or resisting seemed more difficult than ever. The situation in Jerusalem was truly desperate. Hezekiah, seeing that all alternatives had been exhausted, made a crucial decision. In an act of deep faith and desperation, he went to the temple, his heart heavy with the gravity of the threat hanging over the city. Once there, Hezekiah did something that revealed the depth of his trust in God. He took the letter sent by the Assyrian messenger, full of provocations and threats, and spread it out before the Lord, as if he were presenting a case in a divine court. It was a gesture laden with symbolism. By placing the letter on the altar, he was handing the situation completely over to God, demonstrating that there was nothing more he could do and that the solution to the problem lay solely in the hands of the Creator. Hezekiah prayed fervently, asking God to intervene, not to let the city be destroyed and to show his power before the nations. He cried out for help, not only to save Jerusalem, but also to prove that the Lord was the only true God, capable of protecting his people against any threat. It was a moment of vulnerability and pure faith, showing that even when all seemed lost, Hezekiah firmly believed that only God could work a miracle and save the city. Hezekiah's response was not just a plea for salvation, but a declaration of total trust in divine providence. And then something truly unbelievable happened. On that very night of terror and anguish, the impossible came true. God answered Hezekiah's fervent prayer in a way that no one could have predicted. An angel of the Lord descended from heaven with a divine mission. In a single night, in the blink of an eye, the Assyrian army of 185,000 soldiers was devastated. Imagine the impact. A colossal army which seemed unbeatable was annihilated in a moment. When the inhabitants of Jerusalem woke up at dawn, they were faced with a battlefield covered in the bodies of Assyrian soldiers. There were no more enemies in sight, just the surreal scene of an inexplicable victory. King Sennacherib, who had led the invasion with such confidence and arrogance, was forced to retreat in humiliation. His invasion failed dramatically and completely. And the story didn't end there. As he returned to his homeland in the city of Nineveh, something even more shocking happened. While worshipping in his temple, Sennacherib was murdered by his own sons. An unexpected and brutal tragedy that marked the end of his tyranny. It really is breathtaking, isn't it? The incredible turn of events not only saved Jerusalem from destruction, but also dramatically and powerfully demonstrated God's ability to work miracles and change the course of history with a single act of divine intervention. And then, as we reflect on this incredible story, we are invited to dive into an ocean of emotions and profound lessons. The story of Hezekiah and divine intervention is not just a biblical tale, it is a powerful testimony to the strength of faith and the power of the impossible. Imagine yourself in the shoes of the inhabitants of Jerusalem at that time. A city surrounded by an immense army, an uncertain future and the shadow of destruction hanging over them. But in the midst of all the despair, one man, King Hezekiah, decided to put his total trust in God. He doesn't resort to despair or panic, but instead seeks refuge in the temple and offers his heartfelt prayer. By placing the enemy's threatening letter before God, he does more than just make a symbolic gesture. He expresses an unshakable faith, a burning belief that God can and will save his city. And in response to this pure faith and indomitable courage, God acts in surprising and extraordinary ways. In a single night, the impossible becomes reality. An angel of the Lord eliminates an immense army with a supernatural blow. The city of Jerusalem is saved, not by military force or human strategy, but by an act of divine power that defies all logic and understanding. The scene is one of dramatic impact. An army that seemed invincible crumbles in an instant, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem are confronted with a vision of miracles and hope. Sennacherib, who had boasted of his invincibility, faces a humiliating defeat and retreats in disgrace. And in a final stroke of divine justice, he meets his fate in a tragic and unexpected way. His own sons murder him, completing a cycle of ruin that began with his attempt to destroy God's people. But beyond the historical impact and drama of the narrative, this story offers something even more profound. It challenges us to reflect on our own faith and courage in the face of adversity. It teaches us that even in the most desperate situations, where all seems lost and hope is in short supply, a sincere act of faith and unwavering trust can bring transformative and unimaginable results. The lesson here is not only about God's power to answer prayers, but also about our ability to believe in the impossible and to act courageously, even when everything seems to be against us. Hezekiah shows us that true strength comes not from our own abilities or resources, but from our willingness to trust fully in something greater than ourselves. So the next time you find yourself in a moment of crisis or despair, remember this story. Remember King Hezekiah, who faced the impossible and saw God's power at work. May this inspire you to face your own challenges with firm faith and unshakable confidence. No matter how big the army that seems to be threatening your life, or how bleak the situation may seem, Hezekiah's story reminds us that there is always hope. Believing in the impossible and trusting in divine power can transform our reality and bring us victory. And so each of us can find the strength and courage to face any challenge, knowing that the same God who saved Jerusalem is with us, ready to make the impossible happen in our lives too. So, guys, what did you think of this story of faith and miracles that defies our imagination? Hezekiah's journey and the miracle of Jerusalem are truly inspiring and remind us of the amazing power of faith and trust in times of adversity. If this story has touched you and left a chill in your stomach, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our amazing videos to come. Your like is super important to us, as it helps us to keep bringing you content that you love. And of course, we want to hear from you. What did you think of Hezekiah's story? Leave your comment below and share your impressions, doubts, or even other inspiring stories you know. We'd love to read each of your comments and interact with you. In the meantime, take a look at the videos that appear on the screen. We have a selection of fascinating content that you'll love and that is sure to keep your curiosity piqued. Thank you very much for watching this far. Your presence is essential to us, and we look forward to sharing more exciting and inspiring stories with you. Until the next video, and rest assured that, with faith and courage, there is no impossible challenge.